paradrama tales.
When did you realize someone hated you enough to ruin your life? Mine came 9 months after I do, when my mother-in-law poured wine on my wedding dress called My Miscarriage, God's Correction, and later confessed she'd rather see her son dead than married to me. The morning of our wedding dawned bright and hopeful, yet beneath the soft glow of sunlight, I couldn't shake the knot of anxiety tightening in my chest, an unshakable sense that someone intended to rain on our parade, and I would soon learn just how right I was. We'd chosen a simple backyard ceremony at my husband's childhood home. White folding chairs lined up on the lawn, wildflowers in mason jars, soft piano music drifting through the air. But the moment the officiant asked, "Does anyone present object to this union?" the idol shattered. My mother-in-law rose to her feet, as if on cue, her voice cutting through the murmurs of surprise. Yes, it should be me instead. I froze 1,000 faces turning toward her jaws, and my own dropping in disbelief. How could she stand there on my husband's happiest day and proclaim that she, not I, belonged beside him? The officiant shrugged and moved on, but the damage was done. My blood ran cold as I felt the air thicken with her hostility. Guests exchanged awkward glances, some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others pretended nothing happened, and my husband's eyes went glassy with embarrassment. Yet he stood rooted by love and confusion. I forced myself to smile, to breathe, to press through the ceremony and exchange vows despite her bitter proclamation echoing in my mind. Every I do felt like defiance against her tiny declaration of ownership, and every step down the aisle afterward felt like a gauntlet. Was this a glimpse of the years to come? The volunteers who'd set up chairs avoided my gaze. Parishioners whispered about family drama. And for a moment, I questioned whether I'd done something unforgivable just by choosing to marry the man I loved. But as my new husband took my hand, squeezed it tightly and murmured, "I'm only here with you," my resolve hardened. I realized then that her public betrayal, far from weakening me, had exposed her true intentions to control and manipulate through humiliation. That afternoon, between congratulations and forced smiles, I replayed her words in my head, the sting of her envy mingling with relief that I'd never have to doubt his loyalty. The altar, once a symbol of unity, had become the stage of her cruelty, but it also became the crucible in which our partnership was forged stronger and more resilient than any passive-aggressive jab she could ever deliver. For the next 6 months, our home became a battlefield of whispers and veiled threats. My mother-in-law's silent warfare waged through text messages at dawn and offhand concerns at family gatherings, each one a knife aimed to cut into our marriage. She stopped short of outright confrontation, instead sending late-night group texts to my husband's siblings, accusing me of poisoning his mind, then calling my work to check on his welfare, prompting awkward HR visits. At holiday dinners, she'd linger by the wine rack, murmuring to cousins that weddings change people while casting furtive glances my way. When I complimented her casserole, she'd feign a tremor in her voice and remark, "I wouldn't risk my health on heavy food," reminding me she was the victim in her own story. Invitations to barbecues arrived on crumpled napkins with the note, "Just family, hope you understand," then vanished from the calendar altogether, replaced by polite calls from my husband. "She's had a tough day, maybe give her some space." Meanwhile, I discovered our shared bank statements subtly altered small automatic donations from our joint account redirected to her favorite charities, and learned that every time I blocked her number, she'd camouflage new burner lines to flood my voicemail with silent calls, forcing me to screen each incoming ring. At work, rumors circulated that we were estranged, and guests at our home whispered that the bride never felt welcome. My husband, torn between filial guilt and loyalty to our vows, tried to mediate, but each conversation ended with him apologizing for not protecting me better. His shoulders stooped under the weight of her manipulations. I kept a journal of insults overheard at family BBQs. She's loopy enough to take Michael away from his mother, and the passive-aggressive gifts photo frames emblazoned with "Home is where the heart is," with our wedding picture removed. Yet through each indignity, I found strength in our shared laughter after her stormy visits and the quiet reassurance of late-night phone calls when he whispered, "I love you, not her," and in the decision to rebuild our boundaries brick by brick, blocking numbers, consulting our lawyer about harassment, and meeting with a counselor when the emotional toll threatened to fracture us. By the time I planned his surprise birthday party, I had mapped every tactic she used, every whisper, every friendly warning, which turned out to be invaluable intelligence against her final gambit. That half year of silent warfare taught me that true love recognizes and rebuffs control, and that courage is sometimes forged not in a single grand gesture, but in the daily act of refusing to bow to someone else's bitterness. That afternoon, everything changed in a heartbeat. At exactly 4:10 p.m., I stood in the dark kitchen, surrounded by balloons and cake, clutching a party popper, my heart hammering with anticipation. And when 4:30 p.m. rolled around with no sign of Michael, a cold pit of dread formed in my stomach. He'd always returned from his Saturday morning fishing trips at precisely 4:10, never 5 minutes late, and yet here I was, waiting in silence as laughter and whispers filled the room in eager expectation. My phone rang. It wasn't his familiar ringtone or his gentle voice. It was the police. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to tell you this," the officer said, and my world cracked open. He told me they'd found Michael's truck jackknifed in a ditch off Highway 27, the side mangled as if it had been shoved there on purpose. "He's gone," the voice continued, and I fell forward, my scream shattering the tense hush. His family collapsed. Co-workers fumbled for comfort, and the cake, our centerpiece of surprise, mocked us with its untouched happy birthday inscription. At the hospital, I held his cold hand, tried to wake him, begged for a spark of life that never came. The doctors murmured about head trauma and internal bleeding, but their words were muffled by the roaring in my ears. When the coroner explained that a silver Toyota Corolla had slammed into him at high speed before speeding away, I knew deep down who to blame. Rage boiled over my grief as I replayed every threat, every manipulative text, every veiled warning from my mother-in-law. Back at home, Justin and Anna sifted through Michael's phone records with Detective Parker, finding the abrupt silence in his calls and texts at 3:30 p.m. that afternoon, just minutes before the crash. My hands trembled as I handed over the voicemail recordings of Diane's venomous confessions, her voice eerily triumphant. "Accidents happen," she'd hissed. But there was no comfort in justice yet. Instead, there was emptiness where his laughter used to echo. I wandered through our silent house, the walls stained with yesterday's joy and today's tragedy, smashing my fist into a balloon until it popped its shriek a feeble echo of my own despair. In that darkest hour, I vowed I wouldn't let Michael's life, and his last desperate plea for safety, be undone by her cruelty. The scent of chocolate frosting and shattered dreams would forever bind me to the promise I made beside his lifeless body. I would find the truth expose her hate and ensure no one else suffered the price of her twisted jealousy. By the time the initial shock had worn off, I was clinging to every hope that Detective Parker could turn up the smoking gun, just one solid lead to pin Michael's death on the person who hated him enough to steer that Corolla into his path. But every avenue we pursued ran straight into a wall. The traffic camera footage was grainy and inconclusive. We couldn't reliably identify the make or model beyond a silver car. The witnesses who'd seen a Corolla at the scene couldn't describe the driver, only that it drove off too fast. Cynthia's heartfelt testimony about lending her Toyota to my mother-in-law lent the first legitimate suspect, but Diane denied it. Vehemently sworn affidavits placed her at home that afternoon, and cell phone records pinged her handset to the house, not the neighborhood highway. The impounded Corolla from Cynthia's driveway passed forensic testing, with no trace of Michael's blood or hair under the wheel wells. Our hopes flared when Cynthia's neighbor confirmed Diane had borrowed the car for an errand, but that testimony unraveled when Cynthia admitted she'd lied to protect Diane years ago, and who could blame her for muddying the truth now, out of fear for what unwinding this web would cost her? Parker and I pored over Michael's phone logs, hoping to intercept a final text or missed call that might point to a clandestine meeting or threat, but the last calls were to me, and then silence. The only anomaly was an unrecognized number he'd dialed that same morning, but when we tracked the number to a prepaid burner phone, the trail evaporated. I downloaded every scrap of metadata, every entry time-stamped around 3:30 p.m., built timelines that stretched like taut wires beneath me, but the cage of unanswered questions only tightened. The coroner's report confirmed Michael didn't swerve out of panic or illness. He was forced off the road. Yet, with no video evidence, no eyewitness willing to testify, and Diane's cunning, denials the case stalled. I watched Parker's optimism wane as he reclassified it from homicide to accident under suspicious circumstances. Every report filed, every lead, chase ended in bureaucratic shrugging shoulders and polite assurances. We'll let you know if anything changes. I retreated into my grief, haunted by the sound of squealing tires and that final, sinister voicemail. Accidents happen. Sheila, its echo more real to me than the cold facts. It felt as though the system had folded, leaving me alone in a maze of dead ends. Yet even in that bleakness, a stubborn ember of determination glowed. I would not let Michael's life vanish into unsolved case files. I refused to accept no evidence as no truth, because I could still feel him beside me, urging me to keep looking, to uncover the justice he couldn't speak for himself. By the time Elijah slid that black USB drive across my coffee-stained kitchen table, my heart was thundering so violently I could almost hear it over the hum of the refrigerator. He looked pale, like he'd seen something he could never unsee, and I barely listened when he told me Michael had been secretly recording phone calls with his mother. All I heard was proof and justice. I tucked the drive into my pocket and moments later sat in a cramped evidence room with Detective Parker, the glow of the computer screen reflecting off his badge. When the first playback crackled through the speakers, Michael's calm voice breaking the silence with Mom. "This has to stop." I felt as though the world had tilted on its axis. Diane's voice, shrill and pleading, begged him to reconsider marrying me. Then, in the very next file, her tone had turned cold and calculating. "You don't understand, Michael. If you choose her over me, you'll regret it." Those two simple words, regret it, sent my blood cold. As we worked through the files, the recordings became darker conversations in which she threatened to expose private moments to ruin me, and most chillingly, to orchestrate an accident if I didn't disappear. Parker's professional restraint cracked. He leaned back, rubbing his temples, and murmured, "This goes beyond harassment. It's premeditated." I hardly recognized his voice, so foreign was it, from the hours of bureaucratic dead ends I'd endured. But here in these audio files was undeniable proof. Diane had admitted her intent repeatedly over weeks and months, her threats escalating like a twisted crescendo. And in that moment, relief washed over me. I wasn't a paranoid widow. I was a target. My tears came unbidden, not from sorrow so much as righteous vindication. Maker's marks on the drive matched Michael's careful labeling. Entry 1, threats. Entry 2, admission of plan. Entry 3, confession of meeting. He had known how deeply his mother resented me, and he'd been gathering evidence, perhaps worried for my safety, long before his life was cut short. After the last file ended, leaving only the hum of the computer fan, I turned to Parker with a resolve I hadn't felt since Michael's funeral. She recorded herself. "We have to move forward." His eyes met mine with solemn respect, and he nodded. "We'll obtain a warrant immediately." In that small police station room, the weight of fear and frustration I'd carried for weeks finally lifted, replaced by determination. The hidden recordings had exposed the truth. My mother-in-law was no grieving widow, but a calculated villain, and now armed with her own voice, I would see her face justice for every threat, every cruel remark, every tear she'd caused. This was the turning point, the moment when Michael's secret battle became our shared crusade, and nothing would ever be the same again. Just when I thought the hidden recordings held every dark secret Diane could muster, William handed me a battered leather-bound journal, stamped with my mother-in-law's name, and dates scrawled in a tidy hand, 1989-2024. My breath caught as I flipped it open and realized I was staring at decades of obsession laid bare on yellowed pages. Entry after entry chronicled every time Diane had felt slighted by Michael's life. Choice as his first girlfriend in high school, I saw them holding hands at the prom. "I can't bear it." Whispered orders to friends to break his heart for me, and her own vow to never let another woman take him from my side. In her neat cursive, she documented the letters she sent, threatening his coach when Michael's travel team proudly invited a teammate to dinner, the sharp rebuke she wrote to his college dean, accusing him of corrupting my son's mind. And the first time she faked cancer to pull him home from a study abroad program, complete with medical bills, Michael quietly paid out of guilt. Decades unfolded like a horror story, entries about sabotaging job interviews, by leaking rumors of Michael's poor work habits, frantic notations after each hospital visit. She faked, and a chilling plan scribbled the week before. Our wedding operation, and the engagement in which she rehearsed objections to our vows. The journal became a map of her escalating violence, culminating in recent pages marked by trembling hands describing how she'd lured Michael to the bridge with urgent news of my betrayal, intended as a scare tactic that got out of hand. I read those last entries with salt tears and rage. She detailed the exact route she'd follow in her borrowed Corolla, noted the time, 3:33 p.m., and admitted she had no regrets because he abandoned his mother. Holding that journal in my trembling hands, I felt both horrified and relieved. Horrified at the lengths to which Diane had gone to claim her son, and relieved because I finally had the full picture, the blueprint of her madness. The years of whispers, threats, and lies at last made sense, and I understood that Michael's death was only the final tragic chapter of a story that began the moment he was born. Closing the journal, I carried it straight to Detective Parker, who studied the yellowed pages with the same disbelief I'd felt, and promised me it would serve as the definitive evidence of Diane's lifelong vendetta. In that moment, I knew our fight wasn't just about justice for Michael. It was about ending a cycle of obsession that had haunted our family for generations. I pulled into the driveway that night, feeling cautiously optimistic. Detective Parker had assured me we were finally building a solid case against Diane, but as I fumbled with my keys, I realized the front door was unlocked. A cold knot of dread twisted in my gut. Inside the house was eerily quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the kitchen light left on. I raised my phone, dialing 911, before I took a single step forward. As I crept into the hallway, a soft click echoed behind me. Someone was in the house. My hand shook as I hit record and pressed the phone into my pocket, praying it would capture everything. The next moment, I heard the first crash. The ceramic frame holding our wedding portrait shattered on the floor glass, tinkling like warning bells. I backed into the bathroom and locked the door, heart pounding so loud, I was sure whoever was out there would hear it. Diane's voice drifted under the door, low, chilling. "You took him from me," she hissed. "You left me with nothing but memories and ashes." My fingers closed around the scissors I'd grabbed from the drawer, knuckles white. She rapped on the door again, demanding to be let in, calling me every name in her poison vocabulary. Then, in the same breath, she confessed I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted him to stop this life with you. But he wouldn't listen, so I ended it for him. The words cut through me like a blade. Sirens wailed in the distance Parker had sent back up the moment I called. Diane laughed a high, broken sound as she tried the doorknob. I crouched behind the tub, recording every syllable, tears blazing in my eyes. "He was my baby, and you stole him." Just then the lock clicked as uniformed officers forced the door open. Diane stumbled in, face streaked with blood from a cut on her forehead, knife still clutched in her hand. The police moved in, pressing her to the floor, securing her wrists in cuffs. I stood trembling, watching as she was led away, her final words. "I love him more than life itself," whispered with such raw grief that even in her madness, I felt a flicker of sorrow. When Officer Parker pressed stop on the recorder, I realized I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. But the confession was there, undeniable. Diane had admitted her crime with her own voice. In that moment, I felt the final chains snap. The woman who had torn our family apart, who had haunted Michael's life from day one, was finally powerless. As they led her past me, I stepped out of the bathroom, closing the door quietly behind me. At last, the home we had built our sanctuary was mine again. In the weeks after Diane's arrest, the scales of justice finally began to tip back in our favor, and I found myself both relieved and determined to reclaim every corner of the life she had tried to wreck. The courtroom became a stage for decades of private torment. With Michael's meticulous recordings and the journal's revelations laid bare, the judge had no choice but to acknowledge the full extent of Diane's obsession. And when the gavel fell on a guilty verdict, I felt the weight of her tyranny lift just a little. Back home, I walked through each room of the house, our sanctuary, and methodically unpacked the boxes of terror she had left behind. Her threatening letters, the last poisoned gifts, even the shattered wedding portrait she'd used to fracture my heart. I cataloged every piece of evidence in a new binder titled Freedom. Each page a testament to Michael's courage and my refusal to be silenced. Neighbors who once exchanged wary glances now stopped to offer condolences. And over coffee on the porch, I realized that healing would come not only from legal vindication, but from reconnecting with a community I had nearly lost. I reinstalled the locks and the security cameras with confidence rather than fear, programming in the code that Michael and I chose, together a small ritual that felt like a promise to his memory. In the backyard where Diane once threatened to poison our celebration, I planted a rosebush, Michael's favorite, in soft soil, its thorny stems. A living reminder that beauty and strength often grow through pain. Friends and family gathered that spring for a simple memorial cookout. No chocolate fountains or grand gestures, just laughter and shared stories of Michael's kindness and humor. And when I spoke, I made a vow in front of them all to live fully, fiercely, and free from the shadow of his mother's malice. And though the courtroom proceedings and inheritance settlement once loomed like endless gray clouds, they cleared as soon as the final signatures were filed, formally transferring full ownership of our home back into my name alone. Standing in the front hallway, a place that once felt like a battleground, I finally unlocked the door with Michael's key again, stepping inside as if for the first time in years, breathing deeply, knowing at last that justice had restored more than property. It had restored my dignity, my peace, and my right to love and remember Michael on my own terms. Standing here in the front hall, the sun filtering through the windows where Michael's laughter once danced, I finally feel the tension slip from my shoulders. This house, our house, has endured whispers and the dark betrayals that cut deeper than any blade, and yet its walls have stood strong, just like our love. Planting that rosebush in the backyard wasn't only for memory, it was for rebirth. Each bud that blooms is a promise renewed that no one can steal our joy, twist our story, or silence our truth. I've learned that justice isn't just about a verdict or a locked door. It's about reclaiming your life one choice at a time, choosing to forgive yourself, choose hope over fear, and choose the people who lift you up. If you've ever felt cornered by someone's cruelty, remember you have the power to write your next chapter. Start small, plant a seed, share your story, surround yourself with those who believe in you, and know you're not alone. If Michael's fight teaches us anything, it's that love and resilience can outlast even the darkest designs. Thank you for listening to our journey. If it moved you, please subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss our next story of courage and survival. Share your own experiences in the comments below, because when we speak our truth, we build each other up, and that more than anything is the real triumph of the human spirit.